Well, why don't I start us off with introductions? We'll get that going and see if somebody else trickles in. The roads are not bad, but it still might be slow in some, who knows? In fact, the roads in the city of Omaha are really quite outstanding.
Austin Rouse was in
Eric Williams, Pat Goonerty.
Derek Miller, City of Omaha. David Stern and DOT.
Or City and DOT.
Todd Fitzer, Douglas County.
Gary Plagato, City of Vista. Pat Dow, City of Vista.
Jim Warner, MAPA.
Carlos MAPA.
Fort Barber, Napa.
Don Butler and DOT. Jared Walker and DOT.
Jeffrey Smith, Public Works, Omaha.
Ed Brooks, Metro.
Mike Helgerson, Napa.
Lindsay Button, MAPA.
Tim Adams, WSP.
For those that are participating online, now is your chance to introduce yourself, please.
Jeff Subject, City of Omaha.
Dan Carpenter, Benish.
Andy Wicks, Potawatomi County.
Greg Jewell, Felsberg, Halton, Holovig.
Terry Rush, E&A Consulting Group.
Alex Sick, HDR.
Jerry Doyle, Federal Transit Administration.
I'm Greg Carson with the Iowa Department of Transportation, Traffic Operations and Safety Bureau.
Also got Harry. Harry Rush with DNA.
Yep, thank you.
Terry got introduced twice. He must be pretty special.
You know, reputation precedes me.
So Court, nobody came in. Do you want me to just read the action items and put them, or just hold off until our next meeting since we do not have the required quorum?
Yeah, I would say you can go ahead and, well. Yeah, I guess it would be nice to know if anybody had any comments on the minutes, and we can address those next time. And I
Okay.
think the same is probably true of the other resolution. You can do that.
And we got, obviously could do number 2. We're not voting. Well, might have been, but. So, I'll start with minutes. December 5th, you have minutes that were in the packet. Does anybody have any questions or comment on those minutes that we could get addressed before we potentially vote on them next? Seeing none, or I don't think there's anything to do on those. So today we were going to present a resolution to recognize Denny Wilson. So I guess I'll just I'll speak that when I started in consulting in 1990, Denny was the design engineer at the city of Omaha. So Denny's been doing this a while. I don't know how much time it took him to get to that position, but obviously that position takes a little while, so he's been at it longer than that. But Denny retired last month, for those of you that maybe have not heard, so he's not running for re-election for Sarpy County. And so I guess with that, I don't know, you want me to go ahead and just read through this? We're not having to vote on it, but we wanted to just recognize.
Yeah, I think that'll be fine.
So I'm just gonna read this then. The TTAC committee of Omaha, Council Bluffs, and MAPA serves to evaluate and recommend actions to improve regional transportation system. Whereas the committee seeks to recognize members who made a significant contribution to the mission. And whereas Denny Wilson, PE and PhD, I'd be remiss if I missed that, serving the region in multiple capacities, notably at the city of Omaha, Sarpy County. And whereas Denny Wilson represented Sarpy County on the committee for 14 years. And whereas from 2011 to 2022, Denny Wilson served as chairperson of the committee. And thank you, Court. And whereas during his tenure, Denny Wilson executed the office dutifully and faithfully. And whereas as of January 1st, 2026, Denny Wilson has retired from the position of Sarpy County engineer, ending his term as representative of Sarpy County on TTAC. And therefore, be it resolved that the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee formally recognizes Denny Wilson's dedication, service to the committee, and to the region. passed on this 16th day of January 2026. I know we can't vote on it today, but that is in recognition of our former chair and good friend of many in this room, Denny Wilson. So I'm sure he's not listening, but just in case.
We'll send him the Zoom.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. So next month, it looks like we're gonna be looking at Amendment 3 to the 2026 TIP. Amendment 1 to the 2050 Metro Transportation Plan, or MTP, and approval of the 2027 Federal Safety Performance Measures targets. And so I guess with that, Court, if there's anything today that you want to share with us that we would have a chance to look into or think about or research, go ahead, and otherwise we'll move on to discussion items. I'll leave that up to you since we can't vote.
We will proceed to take these items to our board next week. So I'll go through them quick, and if anybody has any questions on the amendments. As far as the MTP amendment goes, most of that stuff came through last month anyway, before it went out for public comment. So a lot of that's not really new. But I would like to know if anybody has questions or concerns about the TIP amendment. Do it. So what we're doing on the TIP amendment is we're updating the group project categories to align with the new metropolitan transportation plan adopted earlier, or I guess late last year. And we also, I'm adding the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure NEVI formula program to the TIP as a fiscal constrained federal funding source, because we are adding a project using that source of funding to the TIP. In addition, we're adding a few projects into the program. I believe all of these, none of these additions affect any of the regional funding. These are all things that are using discretionary funds or state controlled formula funding. The city of Gretna is adding 204th and Schramm Road paving. Basically, we're adding some congressionally directed spending, $5 million of that program in 2027. They're going to be doing the preliminary phases with local funds this year. And then there's a few City of Omaha signal infrastructure projects, both infrastructure phases as well as signal operations projects. All of those are being added into the TIP with CMAQ funding. So this is these are awards that were provided to the City of Omaha through NDOT. And then I think the last piece on there is that EV station that I mentioned using the NEVI funds. So NDOT is using some of their NEVI formula funding, about $380,000 of it, to install an EV charging station down in Gretna. That is the TIP amendment. Any questions about any of those projects, any of those changes?
Jerry, just one question for you on NDOT. I know there's been the on-again, off-again part of NEVI, and they've released some funds for kind of those initial phases. Could you touch on just what the kind of plan is kind of going forward for the next phase of NEVI? I know the initial sort of spine was the interstate system, but what's the next round of NEVI going to look like for the units?
The next round, assuming we get there, will be either, I believe, to build out the alternative routes corridor, or the exact language there, but Jenny Campana has moved over to our area and she is managing all of that work now. I can get a more thorough update for the group for next month. I know we're trying our best in a very short amount of time to get the funds for these 5 or 6 locations obligated so that we can get those committed, get those underway. We're going to start working with WSP very shortly on some assistance with the engineering work to provide support to those locations. We're effectively serving as a pass-through to those locations. NDOT won't be building these things. We'll be providing their funds to these independent locations to do the work. But regarding phase 2 or phase 3, whatever it would be at this point, I know we're wanting to work as quickly as we can to utilize these funds just in case they would go away or be repurposed in the near future. We want to commit to this as much as the communities across the state want to use them.
How much are we talking, because these are this is the netting programmatic side that goes to the state, right? How much, I guess, what's the impact? How much are we talking about total?
I'm really not sure. I'll have to get that into.
I think an update next month would be great. I mean, just given that, you know, the funds were got stopped and now they're flowing again. I know the Gretna piece was the element that hit our metro for that first phase, but then there was some question about, well, were there other opportunities when there were more eligible corridors in future phases? So it's a good opportunity for communities that if you're interested in pursuing those, that now that there are funds available, make those.
Did I hear you say there will be an update next month, and that's requested updates?
Yeah, I would love to get, we can get.
I'll make sure we find out.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
And then, is the information about this station available? Can I take a look at it? I'm just interested in the details of what this specific location will be. Looks like it's at the Flying J on the southwest corner, but.
I'll just kind of cue to Jenny.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thanks.
Just from a District 2 standpoint for an update for next month. The district got a directive from the administration that will be using some additional CMAQ money over the next few years for 27, 28, 29 to program some metro resurfacing projects. So those will probably get entered into the system sometime soon. We'll have to work with the city to identify some areas of interest. My understanding is that it is CMAQ money.
Okay. Okay.
One non-NEVI comment. I just want to thank MAPA for developing this universal ID to connect the LRTP and the TIP. It's going to make it far easier for us, and I believe at the highway and MTA level, to make those connections between the projects. They don't always align. We don't align. So I don't know if it creates burden at the local level, but we certainly appreciate it at our level.
We're still, you know, I'm still in the phase where I'm using both this and the older ideas, so eventually, I mean, once we get into 27 tip, it'll become much more clear how useful it is. But thank you. And then for the First Amendment to the MTP, this was brought to the committee last month, as I said. There hasn't been a whole lot of changes since then. I added that EV station project, as was mentioned in the TIP amendment. And then I also finished adding those MAPA universal IDs to all the projects. MAPA did not receive any comments on the draft amendment during the comment period. One thing that I would like to point out and kind of, I guess, ask from everybody is if anybody is looking to apply for discretionary funds or potentially going for some congressionally directed spending, aka earmarks, anytime in the near future, please let me know, especially if you're going after a build grant. That is, what is it? Is that due at the end of February? Is that right? Due at the end of February, but since we have the MTP amendment open presently, I can get this in to that document before we take it to our board next Thursday. So if you let me know, it doesn't need to be like, I don't need exhaustive details on the project, but if I can know kind of like the name, where it is, what you're doing, and roughly how much it's gonna cost, and when you're gonna do it, I can get that into the MTP, and then we don't have to, that won't be a bump later on. So if,
I think the build grant actually has on page 27, section 7, I'm kidding. There is a section where it does stipulate that it should be in the MTP, and the applicant's timeline for when that's gonna be put in place. So just, we're asking for early consideration so that that doesn't become negative check mark on any of your applications. We want to make sure that everyone's as successful as possible and willing to help. And this is one way we could help get early action. Awesome.
So yeah, we have a project we expect to submit a build grant for. I know Lindsay and Jeff were on our meeting this week, and had another meeting yesterday for Ralston. So the city of Omaha, Ralston is intending to apply for a build grant for 84th Street from Elmwood to Harrison. Primarily a repave project and light pavement. There's really good opportunity for safety features, potential transit enhancements with Metro's bus route there, and some sidewalk additions and some gaps in that corridor. So we're looking at an application obviously, we're working some things out in the next month or so to get that application in, but probably $15 to $20 million is what we're expecting to ask for with that bill grant. We're looking at a 2030 construction schedule, 2030, 31, somewhere in there. And we have to have the funds committed by the end of fiscal 30, so I think that timeline plays pretty well with where we're at current project. We have some seed money and relinquished highway, 22, 23, somewhere in there. And the city of Omaha also received $4 million from NDOT for the fact that it was end of life payments. We're planning that as part of all of our match for that particular project, so. Yeah, any help, and one of the conversations we had yesterday with Ralston was if anyone from MAPA wants to be involved in our meetings, it looks like we're probably gonna have weekly meetings leading up to the application on Thursday afternoons. So if anyone from MAPA wants to be involved in these conversations, we'd love to help and appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the only other note other than just the coordination on the amount for the tip and then a letter of support, we're gonna just talk about that tip LRTP consistency piece. If you haven't yet reached out to the congressional delegation, Senate and House offices, get those letters of support. They're really important when it comes down to, the project meets all these merit criteria. They only have a certain number of awards per state. They really look for that congressional delegation to actually, senators to say, this is a great project, we want to support this one at the very end. So those conversations are important too. So get those letters.
There's a DOT hub site for letters of support from the state, so there's the DOT hub.
Yeah, and I guess DOT, I don't know if anyone can answer the question of, NDOT still owns the right of way for the corridor, even though the highway's been relinquished. I don't know what level of participation DOT wants.
I think we still need to bless it some way. I guess that might pump that to legal for their input with regards to the relinquishment agreement and any changes of access along that corridor, but I think it more or less just needs to go across our table for rubber stamp.
Yeah, okay. As Carlos alluded to on the infrastructure hub website, there is that letter of support request and you can put in project details and ask that specific question. That's the kind of formal way they've asked for these types of projects, including earmarks to get a letter of support from the DOT.
Yeah, and if you're 3 months ahead of when the application is due, they will help with application submittals as well. For free.
Yeah. If we ever get a no.
I dare believe it. For free, they will help you submit applications.
Now all we need is a NOFO that gives us 3 months to respond.
Yeah, which we don't exist.
Austin, I'll be happy to attend the week. Okay.
Okay, I think that's all I have on the MTP amendment. Are there any questions about the amendment? I believe. Well, I guess that actually.
That's perfect.
I don't know how you.
Yeah, that's all. I'm going to talk through quickly our target changes for safety, performance, and just kind of showcase here. First, this is our performance dashboard. Safety's up, bridge is getting built. We're working on some data stuff for pavement and system and freight reliability, but hopefully in the future, all you will be able to access this, comment on it, and I think it's just selfishly for us, it's a lot less time building slides and reports. So this is how we're going to present our performance. We'll continue adding performance measures if we have things that we want to track to this dashboard as well. But in short, quickly go through our last performance period that was completed was 2024. So again, these are 5-year rolling averages. The rates are based upon 100 million miles BMT. And across the board, also, I will note that MPOs can choose to, and we do work with both of our departments of transportation to set these targets. There's nothing punitive with these. These are just an established measure to track performance and work towards what we put forward in our comprehensive safety action plan last spring, which was to get to 0 by 2040. So down the track, both fatalities and fatality rates, we did not meet targets, and nor were we better than baseline. That these are pretty aggressive targets, and I'll show you on
On the next slide, we unfortunately did not have a good year in 2024, so that did not help us any. Serious injuries, we did achieve a number that's better than baseline, but we didn't meet that target. And similarly for that serious injury rate, non-motorized fatal and serious injuries, we did meet the target and we were better than baseline, but I'll talk through the graphs. That 5-year rolling average has a pretty big impact on those numbers. So I don't think that that's necessarily a pat on the back. Plenty of work to do. And then those targets are listed at the bottom, and I won't go through each of those by number, but those are policy set. Those follow a track to get us to a zero count or number of fatal and serious injuries by 2040. So very quickly, each of these are interactive, and I think that's what's helpful for a person to go through. These are those policy targets for fatalities. If you chose to, you could come down to the bottom. It's kind of hard for me to see in between each of you, but you could deselect or select different items and showcase the graph. But this is very straightforward. We're just pulling each of those numbers by year for our policy targets. As I mentioned, in 2040, our region had the largest number of fatalities that we've had since we've been tracking in 2006 for purposes of performance management. That's based on a lot of things. I won't belabor the points. I know all of you are each working on your own things, and we have our set of projects, but very excited. I'll talk quickly here, and we'll have Dawn and Greg each giving some presentations, as well as Jeff Subject from the city of Omaha talking about some funding opportunities, and then also progress the city's made that hopefully is kind of inspiring for things that other communities might look to achieve. Our regional traffic volumes, again, based upon our traffic report, will be updating that again this year. And so we're working off predictions for BMT and the same for rate. So for the sake of time, I'm not gonna spend a lot more time going through all those, other than to go back to the non-motorist and really kind of talk about something that's very challenging. The non-motorist, of course, we don't have an exposure rate. We can't measure how many people are moving about, and I think it's also very difficult to talk about non-motorist fatalities, and I think Don might talk a little bit more in his section, but these aren't, they're just across the board. There are people unfortunately trying to cross the interstate. There are people finding themselves on the side of the road outside of an abandoned car or something like that. But there are also people just trying to navigate our local streets. So this number is high again. We'll see, unfortunately, an even higher number for 2025. So as a focus area, I guess for MAPA and me, if there are areas and ways that we can help in just kind of working to address this issue, that would be my goal.
One thing I would note, I was in DC last week, and there were several other metros that highlighted, increases in these non-motorist fatalities, and similar issues of crossing, restricted motorways and other things. And so it's a challenge to think about strategies to address that specifically when it is, that's a differential that no pedestrian or cyclist is ever gonna overcome on a road that's 67 miles per hour. So yeah, it's a real issue that I don't know that there's a great solution for, but it is a big challenge.
Mike, you bring that up. Has anybody heard of statistics? We've all heard of distracted driving. But we all see pedestrians that are on their phones that cross against walk signals. I see it fairly frequently. Is there a category that anybody has looked at or noted on cell phone use and pedestrian danger or injury?
It's a good question, Todd. I don't know that, I would actually defer to the team in terms of the crash reporting. I don't know whether that gets put in the officer's report as is in terms of the actual distraction of a non-motorized user. I don't know how that actually gets coded. And, as you know, if you've looked at crash data, the coding is a little bit, I would say, not comprehensive at times. And so, he does a great job of going in, trying to go through all those notes and, kind of the final dispensation of all that happening. Don, you might have a better sense of what that was like.
Hey, Hey, Mike and Todd, as you know, the DOT passed a hands-free law back in July, of which the first several months they issued warnings, and now they're actually issuing citations, and they put out kind of a dashboard here the last week or so that I could forward to you that basically kind of shows that since the law went into effect, the number of hands-free crashes have gone down, the number of total crashes have gone down, fatalities have gone down, and I can share that with you if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit more about that. We are seeing nationally a trend for the last 2 decades now since iPhones came out, distraction in vehicles, also pedestrians. There's been some research. Generally, as you noted, capturing that information from crash reports is difficult. It's based on the officer's interpretation of what's going on, and often the person voluntarily stating they were doing stuff they probably shouldn't have been doing. So we know the capture rate's very low in that information, but we are aware it's an issue. There's some people in different research that's working on things with phones and apps for non-motorists and vehicles. There's some, vehicle infrastructure, vehicle to people kind of things to work on that space. I want to highlight Iowa's work with hands-free that has been very successful for them. In the Nebraska legislature, we have a bill that was introduced that is looking to implement hands-free for us, to replicate that success that I was seeing that would reduce fatalities, improve safety for all of our road users, non-motorists as well as drivers. So we're hoping that legislature will support that and support safety with their kind of piece of what we can do as a whole. From the NDOT side, this year is the highest number of pedestrian fatalities we've seen. I think ever. I look back to 92 was the last time we had separated them out essentially, without hand reviewing each of those. And so since 92 at the very least, and that's staggering. It's really unprecedented. We've never been this high or this close, really. What we're doing at DOT is that 23 we initiated the creation of a complete streets policy. We're working on implementing the structure for a bicycle pedestrian walk infrastructure going along with our roadways as a proactive way of getting out there and creating safe spaces for them to travel in a separate space. That's really the best way to go.
As you look at that increased number, have you got deep enough into it to attribute that trend to anything? Is it drivers that are veering off the road further because of distraction? Is it pedestrians that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing? Do you know?
It's a little of both. I would say if you look at the last decade or two, pedestrians have been making poor choices, and some of the choices they've been making, there's been some distracted. The biggest change I've seen recently was more people getting hit on the side of the road, which appears to be a distracted driver getting off and not slowing down. We passed the slow down, slow down bill that expanded that to not include just emergency vehicles, but also anybody on the side of the road. And we still had 4 or 5 people hit on the side of the road this year, even with that being passed. So, and based on reading the report, because I read every one of the fatality reports, it looks like they didn't even notice that they didn't slow down. They just hit them on the side of the road, which to me implies distracted, like they weren't even looking or being aware. So we did see that higher than usual this year. That's contributing to the benefit. And we saw a couple of them where people were just walking down the middle of the lane on the interstate. Some of those things are just mind-boggling, which is unusual this year compared to some years. But yeah, that's something that we're definitely working on to try and figure out. And hopefully, with the legislature or our law enforcement partners can help us out. Enforcement side, and we can create the infrastructure to separate these users. Yeah, and between distraction and then drug and alcohol use and seatbelt use, I mean, you cover the majority of sort of the legs of much of what we look at in serious crashes, particularly on the high speed roads in Arlington, which is discouraging.
Mike, you just covered everything we used to cover in our Drive Smart presentations to local high schools, for those of you that remember. Seatbelt use, impaired driving, distracted driving, and it's amazing. That's been 15 or more years ago that we started that, and it's the same 3 factors.
Yeah. while the kids looked at their phones during class. They've always done that.
Well, in Nebraska is still, cell phone use is still technically not enforceable.
It's secondary. They
It's
can't enforce it. The difficulty on the first part is, for example, it says like texting, but you could technically be scrolling on the web and that's not actually enforceable. So their ability to differentiate between texting and scrolling on the web on your phone makes it hard for them to know that's a violation and to initiate that action, knowing that it's going to go through the adjudication process and actually stick and have consequences. And so we've talked to them a lot, is how do we make it simple for them to say, yes, this is an infraction, yes, I can take an action on this, and they can have confidence as it goes through that it's actually gonna be functioning in the long term and improving safety. And that's what we're seeing success with Iowa, for example, and the work that they're doing. And we're hoping to replicate that, make it easier so they can.
And Mike, you might have more of a pulse on the legislative side.
Yeah.
There's some.
I'll cover it in,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, going back here a second, the comment from online was Scott from Iowa, and he was talking about a law passed in Iowa that has shown a reduction since last July.
Correct.
And then NDOT pointed out that the slowdown or pullover law was passed in Nebraska, so those are the two actions that have happened that have been pointing in this direction. I'm just making sure that I was hearing the past steps correctly. Iowa passed their law.
Yep, and then there's the move over slow down, which is expanded beyond construction vehicles and maintenance vehicles and police officers to everybody pulled over on the side of the road. And then I can just highlight it now, but I think it's LD 594 was introduced by Senator Brokaw last session, the first session of the biennium. It's a carryover bill. It was introduced and it's in committee, but that will be kind of within this 60-day session, something that they could take action on. And that's the hands-free bill in Nebraska.
Hey, Mike, I sent you the crash analysis tool for Iowa as well as the hands-free information. One other thing I might mention that we did this year, early this spring, is we put rumble strips on center line and edge line on every state highway across the state, so that, you know, would it help as far as vehicles drifting across center line or leaving the roadway?
Well, just it's not quite as awesome as that. With almost all the center lines, almost all the rural 2-lane center lines are done. Shoulders and edge lines still have ways to go.
Okay, I misspoke. Sorry, Greg.
No, but it's close. It still was a big jump forward from like 50-60% of the rural 2-lane to 90+% of the rural 2-lane with center line. So.
And then just looking at steps forward, LB 594, is that similar to what Iowa passed? Is it a copy? Okay.
There's some, I mean, there's some differences. I mean, Don alluded to the language is different between the two statutes, but the framework is very similar.
And so we have feelings, I mean, LB 594 is a support type of situation without asking for official positions from anybody who might have to speak on that.
We certainly support it. We wrote a letter last year, but it is one of those things that gets into Nebraska doesn't have primary enforcement of seatbelts, and we are one of the lowest seatbelt usage states in the nation. And so, you know, we're out here on the plains. There's a wave of individuality that we look at. I think having more partners at the local level, having partners at the state level focused on traffic safety, I think we're in a better position than we've been in the past to advocate for these changes. But it runs into a buzzsaw of kind of on one end of issues, don't tell me what to do, and on the other end of issues, do we want more pretexts to stop people? And so you kind of have, you know, strange sorts of, you know, how do you get it to 33 votes in the Nebraska legislature? So it's a challenge to get there, but again, I think having more people at the local level when there's an opportunity to comment on these bills, talking about how this ties to local priorities, regional priorities, state priorities, what we're seeing in terms of changes to behavior and other things that are driven by these issues, we can make, you know, impactful policy decisions.
Yeah, and I asked because in past discussions at the safety committee about targets and trends, a target over long term is great, but it has to translate into action in order to drive toward the outcomes. And I mean, I didn't mean to be harsh, but I know you've heard my comments that unless we change things either in policy or in the construction, we're not going to move in the direction we need. We have to do something to get to the target long term. And if the last 4 years, we've got some challenges there. So this is one of those areas where we've talked about it, we've set targets, we're tracking the data, but unless it translates into different action, we should not expect different results. and policy change in line with something that Iowa has reported has been successful. Feels like a great step in that direction.
Yeah.
So thanks, appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely what we've talked about, but the hands-free is a recommendation from our comprehensive safety action plan for Nebraska, a recommended action and a number of different projects. And I don't want to steal any more of the DOTs and City of Omaha thunder. So definitely, I think you're going to see some of those in the next couple of presentations here. Or at least potential.
Did you have a comment?
Well, we have Greg as his hand raised online.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, just on this topic, I recently had a conversation with law enforcement officer, and he was talking about the extreme speeding. And just his experience was that, it spiked during COVID and has not come back down, and just the speeds that they're seeing. And you probably see some of the stuff on social media, people getting arrested and whatnot. But I don't know if that's part of the conversation at all. I mean, when you have people going double the speed limit and that sort of thing, are people looking at that? I know that's an issue for law enforcement, elected officials, but to me that plays into this as well. And just from his experience, he was talking about how they almost feel almost overwhelmed. I would say is like the amount and level of it is really hard for them to get their arms around.
Yeah, the state patrol, Greg, as you noted, they've been highlighting some of their targeted enforcement. And I mean, when they've been out there for a couple hours and finding, however many citations in that 2-hour period of people going, 20, 30 miles per hour over the speed limit, and some of those extreme cases of people going over 100 miles per hour, that feels really difficult to enforce our way out of. And boy, I don't know. I mean, ever since 2020, when the roads were wide open, people just have adopted some very dangerous practices. And I don't know what to do about that other than, having enforcement targeted and having people pay the cost for it. But cost we're seeing on the other side of it is really, severe crashes. And a lot of that, unfortunately, is tied to some of the drug and alcohol use that we see as well, and some of the fatalities. And so those are shared responsibility issues that we just have to keep talking about. I mean, to your point about drive smart and everything, it's kind of has to be all of the above. To get people to see their role in shaping not only their own safety, but safety of people using the system around. That's a tough issue though.
Anybody see the 16-year-old 136 miles an hour last week at 132nd?
Yeah,
136 miles an hour. He was in a new Audi, wasn't even licensed yet. The police said he picked the car up and 3 hours later it was in the impound. Not that it's funny, I don't mean to say that, but I am gonna, it sounds like piling on, but this is the room. These are the people that need to be aware of this. At the same time, we are trying desperately to get to a zero fatality. But the state has repealed the helmet law, and we are allowing golf cart usage in neighborhoods. And those things, I don't need to tell anybody, don't have airbags, seatbelts, and brake lights and all of those things. So we truly are fighting an uphill battle. And I don't have a solution, but I do want this group to kind of be aware of all of these different ingredients that go into this, as they do all play a part.
Yeah.
And one thing we saw in Iowa with side-by-sides and golf carts, a lot of the fatals or injury accidents have occurred from people that are under the age of 16. They don't even have a driver's license. They're driving these side-by-sides, and they're probably going too fast for what they can handle, and some of these crashes occur.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Scott. I see that. Parents look at them as this harmless little, why not let my 13-year-old, yeah, they don't realize that, crash testing occurs at 35 miles an hour. You don't have to be going 80 miles an hour to be fatally injured in collision. So it is concerning.
Mm-hmm. And not to belabor the point, but one of the groups not represented here is typically enforcement. And so one of the things that as a region we're starting to explore and look at through TAPC and the work with Lindsay and some of our safety folks here is looking at this question about trails and trail regulations as it relates to e-motos, right? These kind of newer vehicle types that are recreation based, but they, like you said, Todd, they are not tested for safety. They have no brakes or lights or any of these
Or
things.
licensing requirements, you can
Mhm.
go 50 miles per hour.
And so we're navigating, what does that mean for our region? Because putting a law in the book is not that great unless you can enforce it.
Yeah, I can.
And so we're trying to work through what that means. Hopefully, this work could be foundational for some of these other things like the golf carts and ATVs and UTVs that are becoming more accessible in terms of price, right? They're a little bit cheaper and people are being able to use it, right? Or get to it and being bought at Walmart or whatever.
Edwards Motorsports, I was at an open house a while back and they've got acres of these things and I said, gosh, you have a huge inventory of, so he goes, oh. Every time they open up a neighborhood to use these things, they're just flying off the line. I mean, they're our best seller and that's exactly what people are doing. And they're convenient, they're affordable. You don't have to license them, you don't have to insure them, you said.
We are in the process of trying to make sense of that and we'll be bringing additional information to this group. Some of the main groups working on this are the TAC committee and the safety committee. We're trying to get law enforcement, health departments and everyone kind of involved in kind of how do we navigate this as a regional way of doing it. Because if everyone does different laws, right? The users don't know when I'm on the Keystone at the city of Omaha or on the Keystone in the city of Bethel. And they don't care, honestly. And so looking at reasonable regional applications of these policy frameworks is something we're dipping our feet into.
So.
Greg also shared a graphic from the Iowa ATV UTV fatality trends after expanded usage from 22 to 24. That's in the chat. If you want to bring that. Well, oh, that's sort of stuff.
And great, well, you're pulling that up. Greg, you will all respond back to, and for all the member communities, we have a streetlight subscription. It has speed data. We've recently taken a look at before and after on some city of Omaha quick build projects. And we saw some pretty close agreement between streetlight and the spot speed studies. So 85th percentile was pretty close. So if you want to do something and get a quick look before and after, if it had, you know, a positive or negative or neutral impact on speeds, that's available for all users. It's just reaching out.
Excellent.
So on these other types of vehicles, today is the application deadline for the mini grants, but the NRD did submit one related to e-moto safety policy development. And so I'll be contacting other jurisdictions to see if we can get some alignment on that. But I did want to clarify, Todd, to your point, I don't think we anticipate that study work to be focused on golf carts. That's a little bit outside of what we're targeting here, but I do think that it's important to keep that in mind as a separate type of new vehicle that is somewhat outside of definitely outside of motor vehicle registration licensing. And where policy development might need some improvement, and where uniform policy would be beneficial. Just yesterday, I was talking with someone not transportation professional related, and they mentioned golf carts in their SID and specifically getting approval to that and the change that it caused in the dynamic of people and users on the streets and sidewalks in the neighborhood, and they were concerned. And so this is definitely another thing that is happening, but I don't think we anticipate that to be part of the study through, if approved, the Heartland 2050 mini grant. So I guess just looking forward with safety, that does feel like another area that is adjacent, but probably outside of what was submitted for the trails and generally two-wheel based active transportation e-moto policy. Just a heads up about where we're anticipating things moving forward, and open to discussion with partners if that's something that can fit into the scope. Maybe we could look at it, but I don't think it was originally anticipated in the way that application was submitted. So thanks.
Greg also shared a flyer to increase awareness of ATV laws in Iowa. Greg, you want to speak to that flyer at all?
Sure, I'll just kind of I don't know if whoever is sharing wants to pull it up, but it's just basically a way to try to get all this stuff into one page. And because these have to be, there's kind of a big exemption with the ag use exemption, but because they are generally need to be registered through the DNR, that's provided a lot of like distribution opportunities for those. And so it seems, just anecdotally, it seems like we see more of these the yellow slow moving vehicle triangles on the back as you drive around too. And the numbers this last year were a little lower, is that because some of the novelties worn off, people are changing their behavior, or just coincidental statistical up and down with the general decline in crashes the last year? But yeah, there's just a lot of kind of confusion of, the ways that the ATV, UTVs are a vehicle and aren't, and are allowed on public roads and aren't allowed on public roads. And this, just like the distracted driving stuff, there's so many, with distracted driving, you could use it for navigation. So everyone would say, oh, I was checking Google Maps, and then the officers would start to ask them. Their first question was, where are you going? And they'd say, oh, just down to Casey's. And so then when they said, I'm going using Google Maps for my phone, they could have a reason to say, well, I don't think you needed the maps to get to Casey's, in the same way, these are intended for secondary roads, but you can get from one secondary road to another on a primary road. And so, there's kind of a loophole for usage kind of just as a second vehicle or third vehicle for a household. And so, because of those ambiguities of the tire, of the speed, of the driver's age being 18 versus 16, that's where the motivation for this came from, to try to have a handout that could be put kind of all over, whether it's at the DNR facilities, licensing, some of the sporting goods type places where people might be seeing or buying these. So.
Great, thank you, Greg, I appreciate that.
But
I think if you want to go ahead and shift back to the slides, I think I'd like to just on, if there aren't any other questions, we'll submit these to board for approval. And we will know that there was, good conversation here, but not an opportunity to vote anyway. And so, yeah, I appreciate all of the comments. Thank you. That there's a lot of the things you mentioned are tangential to work that's being done. We really are looking to build out the MAPA Safety Committee to include a lot more post-crash care, but also, some of the people that are touching on and trying to work on these policy related questions as well, just because that's not naturally a role that TTAC plays, but we'll share all that with you and look to bring something together to move this forward. These will go to both the Departments of Transportation and their state federal highway divisions as well. So I will give an update probably in May or June on our progress. That is just kind of our normal routine.
Sure, appreciate all your work on. I think this is as important as anything we're doing from a design or traffic standpoint as far as safety goes. I think this discussion is paramount, and I appreciate all of your input and efforts as well. Thank you for that. We are moving on to discussion items, just item C on your agenda. This is a time if there's anyone online or in the room that would, this is open to any and all comments from the public. So if there's anyone that would like to comment on anything, now is your opportunity. Okay, not hearing of that. So we're going to move into the Nebraska and Iowa Safety Program update.
So the concept here is just a brief run through our highway safety program process for Nebraska. There's been slight changes, some updates there, but also just awareness of what that program is. I gave a similar presentation to the safety committee with some other pieces this really stripped down to that. Two things I want to talk about: the HSIP program and NUTs, and then I'll highlight the safety growth for all programs, and hopes for that. So as a background, we get about $21 million. This is formula federal funding going to Nebraska that NUT administers. It used to be an open process throughout the year, competitively bidding all projects, state and local together. Our program management decided to create a set aside of $3 million for the locals each year in an annual program. And our safety committee created a application window to go along with that. So it's some kind of ongoing process. It's gonna be a little more structured. There's probably about a third to half of states that have programs like this do the same kind of thing. So given the amount of application we're getting, we think there's more opportunity for more applications going forward after some of the Safe Streets and Road for All planning documents have been finished across the state, that this is an opportunity to create that program more formalized fashion. And the big piece of that would be once a year. It's open between November to January for applications submitted to NDOT, and with the intent that those would get reviewed and approved by May each year to lead into the TIP program that comes through here, right? So you make those updates in a timely fashion. We have a website on the end dedicated to our Highway Safety Improvement Program. It describes eligibility and all the things I'm going to discuss here on what goes into an application. They're due by January 31st each year, so coming up very quickly. We have an email dedicated to receive those, so uthsip@nebraska.gov, send those in. That goes to my team for technical review. Here's the structure. We have about 3 months open for application windows each year. We review those and we'll have feedback. A lot of our locals have experience through this, but some may not. So we provide technical review, make sure it's a quality application and has all the pieces needed. It'll be reviewed by our Highway Safety Committee, which MAPA to Omaha, again, are members of, and so they'll review those and make those recommendations to our Strategic Safety Committee, which is just NDOT leadership. They'll review that and make their approvals in May, with the hope of getting that out to our local partners so they can put it in their tip updates each year in that normal process without having to do amendment later on. So I'm going to walk through what is required in that application. We have a cover that comes with this that really just consolidates the important things in the document. And things that come along with the application is where you are, what the crash history is, why this crash history is elevated and the need of safety improvement compared to other locations. Clarifying what is the proposed improvement, why it aligns with reducing crashes, fatalities, serious injuries to that location, the costs, so we know what that's going to be, and then critically to meet our HSID funding federal requirements, it has to meet one of our critical emphasis areas in our strategic highway safety plan, and it's typically roadway departure, intersection, non-motor. So it really covers a lot of what we're trying to do, particularly in our urban areas, often intersection related or non-motorist. That's just for federal compliance with our safety funds. So I'm going to quickly walk through an example that recently was approved. This was before the new annual structure, but this is a great example. So this is 42nd Fontanelle. This is City of Omaha that submitted their application. Here's the location. They had a history of one fatality there, and it's a pattern of right angle crashes that were occurring. There's a signal there. So this is their cover. It just shows what they're asking for, how much money. At the bottom, you can see the number of crashes, fatalities. It just consolidates some critical things that sometimes get buried in a longer document. This is really useful as we're comparing different applications to see what's coming out. Sometimes we would get an application where they'd have 3 different scenarios, and we didn't know which one we needed to approve because there's 3 different costs, 3 different benefits. We don't know what their locals looking for. So it just consolidates things that are in the document. Here's an example of how we put the crash history and the evidence of that, showing here a fatality, 2 serious injuries over the 5-year period, and then showing the types of crashes. So you can see half of the crashes are angle crashes here, which tend to have a higher severity. Here's a quick map that will show the proposed location. They're looking at putting kind of an elongated roundabout here based on the geometry. Nothing too significant, but it's kind of showing what the concept is. We understand this is planning level. We don't want to make this burdensome, but enough to convey the concept. Showing the cost. So here they're anticipating, round numbers, $1.4 million of construction right-of-way cost. Showing what their expected reduction in crashes there, that crash reduction factor. That's part of that technical review that my team does. We verify that is a valid modification factor. It does match up with the crash types in that scenario. And at the bottom there, the benefit cost, that's a really determining factor for us. We are at NDOT, we really strive to be very cost effective with the federal funds that we have. And so we set an internal target of approving projects with a benefit cost of 5 or above. And sometimes we reject internal projects that have a 3 or something because it isn't meeting the needs, because we know there's better opportunities out there. So City of Omaha did a very good job. I'm sure they had some internal review before they selected this location. Found it, had a good benefit cost and submitted it. So it was very easy for that committee to approve because it's a proven safety countermeasure. It's really has a history, as noted, with the fatal and serious injuries there, and has a good benefit cost from that. That's about it. That's really all there is. I think the whole document was 6 pages long. There really wasn't much to it. We don't want to burden some, but covers those key pieces. Those items are all noted in our Highway Safety Improvement Program. The critical necessary show up there, and certainly if you have any questions, reach out to me or my team. We can help walk you through. We hand out examples. This would be one that we would hand out to some others, Sioux City, other places that we recommend. They're really good examples of quality process. Again, the new program is open from November to January for submittals. So coming up soon is the deadline. Send them to that email, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Just a quick note, as part of our CSAP for all the metro regions, we did take a look at some of the benefit costs and compared them to Iowa, Nebraska, and federal standards. So if you want to check out the CSAP, this is our unabashful plug to the CSAP. If you look at your community, you will find some of this information there readily available. My staff will be very happy to help you. I believe this 42nd and Continental was one of the applications we submitted as part of our package as we were developing the CSAP. So thanks to everyone involved. But if you want to look at your community, we do have a list and their benefit cost within that CSAP. Our staff would be more than happy to help you out.
And we've subsequently updated our crash data from the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan as well, so that would be available to you. Recognizing those are planning level estimates, so as you go through kind of some additional refinement of projects, we're happy to help again. I'll reference street light, but if there's traffic counts or anything along the lines, potentially help with, happy to provide data and resources for project applications.
I just want to note that we recently just let roundabout for HSIP funds at 33rd and Hamilton. It came in, I think, at like $600,000. The roundabout that is super cheap. At the state level, we're in the $4 million range, and so you get 8 roundabouts in Omaha for one in the state. They're all just as effective saving lives.
You guys want to sit down and get some tips from the city?
I'm trying to make ours a little bit smaller.
Jeff's a pretty sharp guy.
Just since you want, to have the most impact with your funds, we could increase that $3 million set aside to get all of those roundabouts.
So certainly, we could probably do them as, pilot with the removable stuff to start out.
There you go. Those are really opportunities. I highlight that, and they show that in the benefit costs. They're very cost effective, and so we'd love to see more coming in from our communities. And we do have lots of roundabouts. We have near 300 roundabouts in the state. We have one of the highest per capita roundabouts in the union, and really want to continue that because we know it's successful. It's hard to run a red light when there's one there. If you're speeding, it really makes you slow down pretty quick. So it covers a lot of opportunities there. So that's our Nebraska program. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Safe Streets and Roads for All. This is the biggest opportunity the federal government has given directly to local agencies from a safety perspective ever. So $1 billion per year, over 5 years, so a total of $5 billion for safety. Doesn't come through the NDOT. We're not a gatekeeper. It's from the federal government straight to the locals. You have to apply for it. They come both in plans, and you've heard this, as well as improvements. This is the last year, so I'm highlighting this is our last opportunity. MAPA did a really great leadership choice in creating the safety action plan for the MAPA region. And so all the localities underneath that can directly apply for a project underneath that umbrella. So you don't have to go through the planning process. You can just go apply for an invitation. In general, for the state, we received $16.2 million. So it's effectively 5 years worth of safety funds that goes to locals. So it's really good opportunity, and I'd love to see more go out to local partners. We're supportive, as you talked about with the infrastructure hub, there's support, but really it's the locals that do the work. We're here to support you. I want to highlight 3 awards that have gone to this area. So certainly MAPA, they got funding to create the action plan. Blair got some funding, and then Omaha just recently received $10 million to construct 3 roundabouts, Sorensen and Stores. That's huge. Again, that's like 3 years worth of funding going to Omaha. So I don't want to see you miss out on the opportunity for this funding. So take the value that MAPA created the plan and go for some of these opportunities.
Now, just know, just across the river, the Bluffs got an additional planning demonstration grant as well, on the back end of our Safe Streets and Roads for All projects. So lots of interest and movement within the MAP region.
I got a question. That $3 million that you said that goes to locals, is that a minimum? Minimum or max?
The maximum.
Yeah, okay.
Our program management set that aside. Wasn't really clear necessarily exactly why, but that's what we were calculating funding. I would say we generally receive less of the smaller ones. We get maybe about $1 million a year in these kind of projects, 1 or 2 from our local partners. Not very often. And then every few years we'll get a large one. We get like an $8 million Willow Road or something bigger like that. And so if you look at our program currently, about 1/3 of our funds go to locals, but they're often tied up in viaducts or larger projects. And so what this will actually do is have fewer of those large $8 million, $10 million projects and more of the smaller projects. So that's kind of how we see the shifting. What that means is that a little more effort from our local partners to create these smaller projects.
And 2 questions on that, just given the way that NDOT manages like the competitive bridge program funds or state bridge program funds where, you know, like a larger project like 42nd Street bridges or, 26th or 26th and Q, where, you know, a community like Omaha would get maybe 2 years of the funding. Do you see like a provision for larger projects in, you know, a metro area where maybe there is a larger safety project? Would committee look favorably at like a larger application that would take up 2 years of that program?
I don't think so. I think the intent is to focus on more smaller ones and less of the larger ones. I don't think that is not, those are still possibilities, but I think the intent is to have fewer of these large projects, a lot more of these small ones, given there's a lot of opportunities that you see in your action plans for roundabouts or smaller improvements. And we're hoping to direct more of those funds, so more communities necessarily.
Easier to deliver with federal funds too.
Yes, it reduces our risk when a project doesn't get delivered on the year that we had hoped it would.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier that there was a large amount of pedestrian crashes recently. Does that affect the way in which HSIP funding needs to be spent?
It can, yeah, great allusions. So in the FAST Act, it created a special rule called vulnerable road user. And the way that works, it affects our federal HSIP fund. If the percentage of fatalities for these vulnerable road users is equal to or greater than 50%, it requires the state DOT to obligate at least 15% of their funds over the next full fiscal year towards improving safety for vulnerable road users. Historically, we've been one of the lowest. We average about 8% of our fatalities are non-motorists, and we're generally in the bottom 5 or 10 of the states for percentages. This year, we're right about 15%. So we're talking about what are we going to do if we do meet that criteria. There's still details with what comes out of the death certificates, whether it's they're deemed suicides or other things that may not count, but we're actively discussing that. We've got about $1.5 million of non-motorist projects already programmed for that time period. And so if we were to trigger that special rule, we need about 3.3 million in that year, so come with a couple more $1 million worth of non-motorist projects to meet that. So it doesn't give us any more funds, it just reduces our flexibility in using funds. Okay. Thank you.
this next year will be the last opportunity for safe streets. I don't think we know exactly what that looks like. Just looking at the applicants and the range, I mean, there were millions of dollars given to EMS providers, for example, for whole blood transfusion, which is just a really great 37% increase in survival rate. Basically, if you take a severe bleeding individual and give them blood before you transport them to a trauma center. So there's a 4-inch. I'm very optimistic. We're very excited. So if there would be communities that would want to band together, and as you said, basically get at these low cost systemic safety, I think that some of those will be projects that may not be as successful in the current HSIP benefit cost process as well. So if you see those things out there, we're willing to help put together joint applications, and we're excited about taking advantage of this last opportunity if it does turn out to be kind of that traditional new vote process. So.
And that bring us to Iowa's presentation.
Iowa's presentation, yes, please.
And that is, who's doing the presentation?
So that'd be great.
Greg, if you would like to, you should be able to share your screen, and then we'll let you present from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. It looks like it's letting me do the share here. So, yeah, this is similar to what talked about last time we were here a week ago with the smaller committee, and a lot of the overlap with some of the stuff that Don shared. You know, states do things so similarly but slightly differently. And let me move this Zoom status bar out of the way. Okay, so, but I'm just going to run through some of these web page things with the funding programs, and kind of compare and contrast a little bit with what Don talked about, and then kind of focus on that. And so we had, you know, our webpage got some updates and things that were maybe a little trickier to find before became a little more difficult to find. So we wanted to just kind of consolidate as much as we could on one landing page. And so if you just Google like this Iowa DOT traffic safety resource guide, you'll find it. And there's kind of a shorter URL I'll put on the slide too that makes it a little easier to keep track of. But this, the idea here is we wanted to get as much as we could in one spot. And so the strategic highway safety plan, you know, is kind of the overarching umbrella for that. So we have that on top, and then those kind of subheadings. The main ones that I'm going to talk about would be the data and analysis tools with our crash data and related prioritization and analysis type things, and especially here, safety programs and funding. And these, so it's kind of, you know, a link of all the links, and then this comparison, and then there's some other things that we don't have time to get into, but with some outreach, education and training, traffic engineering resources, design standards, speed related things, and then you know, other DOT partners and external research university partner type things. So to focus on the top here, the second section with the safety programs and funding, this one seems kind of important, so we have it twice. Once here is the box and once as its own little pop out. And this is a comparison of the two funding programs. So this is what gets similar to what Don talked about. Iowa DOT also, like each state gets their allocation of the federal HSIP funds, and we keep in a sense, we keep the allocation for the primary system on the state routes, but part of that is because we have a different program that's set aside for local safety funds, and then we do what's called swap, which is we take some program funds and some federal funds and swap them to make what we call HSIP local, which is which allows those to be non-federalized projects, and then just hopefully easier for locals to administer. And so the two main programs I'll talk about here, one is TSIP, Traffic Safety Improvement Program, and the other one is the one I just mentioned, HSIP local. And that formerly was called HSIP secondary because it was just for counties. It's still largely county used, but expanded the eligibility for that. You know, cities grow, they take over what were county roads. Now they have the same secondary road, narrow cross-section issues they always had, but just more traffic than they ever had before. And so some of the same countermeasures might be applicable before that road becomes more urbanized with curb and gutter, things like that. And then just some other kind of overlapping project types. So real quick, first, TSIP, Traffic Safety Improvement Program. That's this one on the left here. That has about $7 to $8 million a year allocated to that. And that's sometimes called the half use or the 0.5% program, or TSF, traffic safety funds. But 0.5% meaning it's 0.5% of the road use tax fund that funds that pot. And then $500,000 goes to traffic control devices as a subcategory. $500,000 goes to studies and outreach, and the balance, which is about $7 to $8 million a year, goes to site-specific projects. So the main unique thing about TSIP is, like Don talked about, TSIP projects are targeted towards existing crash problems. So it's more reactive, and so it has the benefit cost ratio and the crash reduction factor and all of that stuff here. So the timeline for this is these applications are due in August. They're open to any kind of local agency, so cities and counties, but even like institutional roads with university things. So August is the application, and they're reviewed over the fall and then recommended to the commission in November and approved in December. And then agreements going on right now, and then funds are available at the next fiscal year, which would start in July for the state fiscal year. So this has, again, like Don showed, the TSIP one of R2 is a little more complicated because of things that are in our code, but a lot of the stuff that you would have to do any project anyway, a narrative of what you're trying to do, a breakdown of costs, a schedule of your project, pictures, plan view, preliminary plans, and then the crash data. And then that crash data gets put into the benefit cost worksheet with the crash reduction factors to identify, your existing crash situation based on 5 years of crash history and your expected future benefit of your project. And then we have one of the links that's on this resource guide is the crash reduction factor list. So this is kind of a easier way. Instead of going, if you've ever been to the large federal crash reduction factor clearinghouse, it's pretty extensive. So this is kind of a compressed version of that with intersection and segment and curve and other crash reduction factors that we would kind of just take without any kind of review for the TSIP spreadsheet. So that's how that TSIP works. So again, that's more site specific because of the existing crash problems, but it could be an intersection, which is where a lot of it is, whether it's the site or the traffic control device category, but it can also be segment type projects like 4-lane to 3-lane or rural kind of lane departure crashes. So that's where it overlaps more with HSIP local. So HSIP local really quickly is similar, but it's a little more, going back to this comparison, it's a little more proactive. We don't necessarily have to have the crash history because it's more risk-based. So this is where the Safe Streets for All funded safety action plans are beneficial for the counties. We had some previous ones in earlier years; those are still valid. And then the new SS4A plans, they identify these corridors and locations, and so that's where using those as the basis for an HSIP local application could make a lot of sense. And so again, that's $5 million per year. And again, this is the swap fund, so it's considered state money, so it has a little fewer strings attached to it. I failed to mention on TSIP, the maximum per project is 500,000. HSIP local doesn't really have an official cap, but the typical project maximum is about 500 to 800,000. And so that application is a little simpler. It's just kind of a one-page application, but we ask that they apply or provide some of those same materials as available. And usually they have a cost estimate and some cross-section or some plan sheets, and so that helps with our review of those. So before those, if the SS4A plan or something doesn't show where the exact problem is, we have a program called TEAP, the Traffic Engineering Assistance Program, to help identify like a solution. So this is 150 hours of on-call consulting that cities or counties can request through the district office. It does not have to be on the primary system or on the state system. It can be local. And And that'll kind of provide a study with, exhibits, cost estimate, things like that, which can then be a really good as a basis for a TSIP or HSIP local application that would follow. And one subcategory of that is we have we call the on-call roundabout reviews. So if you had a roundabout funded through one of our programs, it would have to go through this review, which is we have two national kind of on-call consultants that can help in the front end with kind of the concept layout or help on the later end with kind of the check plan and final plan reviews for signing and marking, things like that, because we just want the roundabouts to be successful. So it's kind of required when we have a safety funded project, or it's available to any city or county outside of that as well. And that's under the TEEP umbrella, so there's information about that there too. So those are our main kind of core safety funding programs that are available to locals and kind of the cities and counties in the MAPA region. And then there's other grants and funding programs that can see on the resource guide or on just the general DOT grant program page. So.
Thank you very much, Greg. I appreciate that. Yeah, we had a good discussion with the center last week on both of these funding resources, and as Don mentioned, we kind of gave a bit more education to the group on things that we brought to TTAC previously. So it's a lot of material people you speaking to us today.
Thank you all.
Ready to move into number 3 in discussion, and that would be Jeff's subject. City of Omaha, presenting Omaha's Vision Zero action plan.
And Jeff, if you want to go ahead and present here as well, you're welcome to do that.
Sure, yeah, it'll probably be easier. Is that showing up?
Yep, it's about to. Yep.
So wanted to present to the group kind of an update on Omaha's Vision Zero action plan implementation, and a really important strategy that we really emphasize in the plan, and that is trying to improve safety with the mind towards urgency and doing what we can to get safety out as soon as possible. So really what that strategy kind of looks like is building what we can with temporary modular material, knowing that it is not permanent. It is also susceptible to damage, but understanding the greater immediate safety impact that it has, while also in the background starting a plan for permanent replacement in the future and programming that into our CIP. And I just wanted to kind of run over some of the things that we're really excited about regarding the progress. So a lot of small projects that have high safety impact, high immediate safety impact, and then also the funding that we were able to get through our action plan. So on the funding side, the action plan our Vision Zero action plan is really important, especially on the funding end. Right when our action plan was approved by City Council, and in 2024 we utilized that to get over $600,000 in safety funds, combined with a small grant through AARP and the rest of it through Federal Highway, their Safe Streets for All grant program. And most of that money went towards kind of demonstration, modular examples, and also some policy updates that will significantly impact the way we plan our streets systemically. And then just last year, we were able to pair our action plan with MAPA's safety action plan and leverage both of those to get a significantly larger amount of money. So over $11 million in safety funding. The majority of that came through the Federal Highway. As Don mentioned, we're going to be building multiple roundabouts in North Omaha, permanent roundabouts that we're really excited about on our high injury network. And then some of that funding, about $300,000, is going to go towards demonstration projects to where we can do more modular projects, which I'll give you an example here shortly. And then a little over $1 million from the state with their safety funds to build that roundabout that Don mentioned at 42nd and Fontenelle Boulevard. So first example is a project location that we worked on a couple of years ago at 24th and Oak Street that had
It's the only intersection in the city that we actually had multiple pedestrian fatalities, so this is a really important location that we needed to address. So the main issue was we had previously done a road diet which had improved safety, but it still left a lot of risk and exposure. So we wanted to address that by getting something out there as quick as possible. And we'd never done a modular pedestrian refuge island before. And there was a really great opportunity through AARP through their community grant challenge. And we were able to use that money to put in our first our modular pedestrian island at Oak Street, as well as another location on 24th and B Street. We were really surprised and then excited about just the outcome, mainly because it was very easy to assemble. It's very compact, very easy to use, quick to install, and it's been out there for over a year now. We haven't had really any problems at all. We've had large vehicles drive over it, knock over some signs, and the sign issue's really been the only problem that we've had. But plows have been able to get around it. It's visible, and pedestrians and cyclists are using it. And we were able to also, while we were there, enhance the bus stop that a lot of people use as well. And came in, relatively cheap at $20,000. Our first lane reconfiguration or roundabout that we did for post action plan was done on 108th Street for about a little over a mile. Total cost of about $90,000. We funded that locally, converted 4 lanes to 3 lanes, and we're able to get some bike facilities in there as well, and completed that within a couple weeks. So really big safety impact done really quickly. We recently did some access management with modular quick build tools on Center Street from 51st Street or 61st to 51st Street in Saddle Creek. So main goal is to reduce risk and make that corridor a little more intuitive for drivers and more visible. So we did access control through modular median and posting, and just the modular components for the whole corridor was about $15,000 locally funded, and that was just completed at the end of last year. And that was coordinated with our resurfacing. That's happening well, and this is kind of a good example of what it looked like afterward at one location in our project area. So significantly a different look from my view, where you had 4 lanes with no separation, and also locations without pedestrian access. So we targeted those locations, and we're able to provide some vulnerable road user enhancements, and also provide that separation between users. Another location and project that we're really excited about, because it was kind of a really bold step in the right direction for getting as much safety out there as possible, was project location at 32nd Avenue and Woolworth Avenue. Had a crash history of run off the roads. There was a run off the road crash pattern there. Had multiple serious injuries. Had a pedestrian fatality with a left turning vehicle. So the mayor's office wanted us to do something. The Parks Department wanted us to do something. Public wanted us to do something. So we took that initiative and did something I think really big and impactful, and installed our the city's first modular mini roundabout. Small center island, about 30 feet in circumference. Total cost for the project, including materials and labor, was under 100,000. It was more 75,000 locally funded. Installed, didn't take much to install. It was around a little over a week, and there's preliminary discussions to replace this long-term in the CIP with potentially a rebuild and an actual permanent roundabout. And I'd also like to notice or mention that we've surprisingly have not had any vocal anger towards this project for a roundabout. So that I think is a pretty big success for Omaha. So that the community actually liked the idea, and some of the people that I talked to actually were asking, hey, can you find other locations where you can do this? So encouraging feedback. So this is a before and after, really significantly changed the use and look and feel for that intersection. So we used modular roundabout, and also we had modular splitter islands and other modular posts to physically bring in the curbs while not actually touching the curbs and rebuilding them. So again, just we're really excited and happy and encouraged by what we're trying to do, because we're seeing the results that we've been planning for a while, and actually getting those implemented on our streets has been exciting. And we're looking forward to the next round of implementation this year that we're working on. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Subject?
A quick clarification that the modular components are eligible for Nebraska HSIP funds for federal funds. Often they're cheap enough that it may use local funds and go through the federal process, but that certainly is eligible. We've worked that through with our MHWA liaison to verify that. So you're interested in that, could be one thing you could apply for, either multiples in a bundle or certainly individual locations.
So you could purchase them as an AC project in theory. So say we have 500,000 or whatever the number is, 5 million worth of temporary pilot program funding to do roundabouts throughout a given area. We can program it in 28. City can spend it now as an AC and then get reimbursed in 28.
Don't know, we were talking about a program and CPC funds, that's certainly technique that's possible, but really when you AC is short for advanced construction, essentially you're the local or state agencies fronting the funds and then gets reimbursed at a future federal fiscal year. That's not how we usually generally run things with our local partners, because often asking them to front it is a lot. So we usually obligate instead of doing advanced construction.
Any other questions on this topic? Okay, seeing none. Item 4 is, and I don't know who from MAPA staff, maybe all of you, but Nebraska legislative update.
We're in the last day of bill introduction. We'll send something out either over the weekend or on Monday, kind of full rundown of things, but just based on the discussion today, there's a couple of carryover bills from first year. We talk about these briefly. LB 594 is a bill that's getting carried over regarding hands-free in Nebraska. And then there's two kind of related bills related to ATVs and UTVs that do slightly different things. One is a carryover bill from last year, LB 337. And there was a new bill introduced this session, LB 1005, that kind of seek to do different things. We'll provide kind of a rundown and links to those now that bill introduction is coming to a close. And one other bill that actually has a hearing next week, just for your kind of situational awareness, is LB 771, which relates to TNCs like Uber and Lyft, so transportation network companies. And what it seeks to do is kind of clarify when dynamic pricing is allowed related to disaster events. And so the governor provides a disaster declaration, and Uber and Lyft either can or cannot based on what is in the governor's disaster declaration. If you look at the reporting from the state on where TNC usage is, it is overwhelmingly in the Omaha metro, as you can imagine, with Uber and Lyft. And so it's just something to think about, as I know many of you are involved in some of the damage assessments and other things that go into kind of requests for disaster declaration federal assistance. So something we're going to be keeping an eye on, just based on the Omaha metro's share of that kind of overall usage of those. So those are the ones that pop up here, but we're going to take a closer look here as those bills come to hearings. But that hearing is next week for LB 771. So if you did want to provide any comment, you have an opportunity. That's all I have on that.
Mike, can I add a couple others that may be of interest to the group? LB 479 is a carryover from Mosier from last year. It has a number of implications for sales tax usage. It's not a new sales tax, but a redirection of sales tax. One of the pieces of the bill would apply to the Build Nebraska Act, which is currently a 0.25% that is split between NDOT and the cities and counties. The bill as currently scripted would effectively double that to 0.5%. So generating twice in the Build Nebraska Act funding that we currently see. A lot to be debated there, but it is a carryover from last year. And then something that was apparently just introduced yesterday or today by Senator Juarez, LB 1098 would be a bill. This has been tried before, but it would require the state, the NDOT, to adopt a annual or adopt a rail plan and do annual reporting on rail infrastructure throughout the state.
Is there anything in the legislative session related to automated enforcement this year?
There are some carryover bills from last year. I was gonna take a quick status. I think one of them had not been approved, or one of them, I think one of them had a negative vote in committee. So it's at the document, all of that, kind of what is being carried forward as a carryover bill versus what was introduced earlier. I didn't see any specifically related that were new bills introduced this year, but I do need to go through them and scrub that carryover. So we'll do that.
Yeah, one of them.
There were 2 bills last session.
Yeah, 600, LB 600 is a carryover that would focus in automated. So speed, safety cameras, and work zones particularly is able to law enforcement getting there and police those, or speeding, talk about speeding being such an issue. Work zones is a critical location given all road users working as construction zones that trying to work with our law enforcement to help them because it's quite difficult to find a space in limit areas, work zones to actually identify speeders and cite them in a safe manner. So we're trying to help our law enforcement partners do that in an effective and safe way for them.
Yeah. And the original formulation of that before event was for both work zones and school zones. As we understand it from the bill's author, Senator DeBoer, there's just some questions of unique aspects of Nebraska's civil and criminal law about how that citation would be actually done. So I think they're working through it. I don't know if they're going to make much progress on this session, given some of those overarching concerns. But I know that's one.
Okay, thank you. In general, and national scale, I think there's about a dozen states that have so speed safety camera allowed. I think 2/3 of them have the hands-free. So hands-free is much more kind of mature the structure for most states. That was a great example of that. For the speed safety cameras, there's fewer models and a little more work to kind of understand how that would fit in Nebraska if possible.
Well, normally we do member agency updates. It says time permitting. This meeting's gone a little longer than some, so I guess we can do that or not. I mean, here, quiet time of year, not a lot of new construction projects starting up. But is there anything that anybody would like to do a member agency update on? I guess now is your time.
There's a small one. I don't think it's been introduced yet. We're hoping to get it introduced. It's kind of cleanup bill. It's related to we'll make it this session, maybe next one, how busy it is. Related to bicycle signals are state law that are quite over that regard. So Matt Neiman took the lead on trying to help refine that, make it more clear in state statute. And then looking at increasing the minimum threshold for our crash reporting from 1,500 to 2,000. It's been about 5 years since we updated that. Prices have gone up, and so supporting our law enforcement and making sure that it makes sense for them to go out, report crashes. There's a couple just cleanup things we're just gonna hopefully get someone to introduce for us this session and next session.
MAPA will be starting a regional freight plan process. Hopefully next month we'll have something for you, but we're excited about that. We'll look to turn it around in about a year. The activities that we'll bring to you and we'll look for your support as the first phase will be kind of a needs assessment. The second phase will be a policy and process discussion. The goal really isn't to solve all the problems, it's to identify what they are and then kind of lay a groundwork, a strategy for us going forward. Good timing in that it kind of overlaps with Nebraska and Iowa's state freight plan updates. So Iowa's will be out for comment, and so we'll be kind of taking what they've already produced, but we're working directly with Nebraska Department of Transportation, and we'll hopefully have some joint stakeholder outreach here next month with some of the great stakeholders in our region. So we're excited about that. I think there's a lot of opportunity, definitely a growth area.
One other update with the METCE, we're finishing up the formal process for Nebraska supplements to the METCE. And so if you haven't got a copy of that, reach out to Matt Even or Scott Sorensen can get you the update for that supplement.
So that is available already.
It is not formally adopted. We're in the process for formal adoption, and we can get you what that is. So we're hoping to get it out.
I'll reach out to that.
Yeah, we're just giving that out to our district engineer.
Any big changes from the federal one?
That's significantly, there's a lot of cleanup things. One example is like the talk about legislatively with the bicycle signal. There's just some cleanup things as those tools and techniques become more understood and formal applied in the METCE. How are we adopting those? But there's a couple of things, markings, there's some things related to that came out of it that we have to work on for preservation type projects. But certainly there's interest. We can get Scott Swanson to come talk here about any details. That's useful.
Any other member agency updates that anybody would like to address? Okay. Seeing none, is there any additional business that anybody would like to discuss at today's meeting?
Got like a super quick 30-second update. Eric already touched on this bit earlier in the meeting, but just to follow up on what we talked about the e-moto, e-bike safety on trails issue that we're having regional discussions on. TAPC met January 6th to kind of go through and brainstorm some action items. The main thing we're moving forward with at this time is what Eric mentioned earlier. He's applied for a Partners 250 mini grant to look at establishing some template ordinance that can be used by municipalities and jurisdictions to kind of help with the ability of law enforcement to enforce some of those excessive speeds on trails. So Capio Missouri River Natural Resources District is heading up that work in partnership with Bike Walk Nebraska. So that's kind of where we're at on that.
Any questions for Lindsay on that? Thank you for that update. Are there any other additional business items? Okay, at the bottom of our agenda, here are some dates for upcoming meetings for your information, and with that, I know we don't have a forum today, so we don't get to vote on dismissal, but I'm gonna propose that our meeting is over.